This is the Mint live on ZTN Prime, your sneak peek into the world of business, finance, and economies. We're coming to you from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. I'm Ibn Mapunda. Let's get started. Now, coming up, Africa's startup ecosystem is evolving rapidly, with countries like Rwanda, Nigeria, and Kenya emerging as hubs for innovation and tech-driven entrepreneurship. However, many nations, including Zimbabwe, are still building the foundational structures needed to support startups, from access to capital and digital infrastructure to supportive regulatory frameworks. As Zimbabwe drafts its national startup policy, there is a critical opportunity to learn from regional success stories and tailor a framework that empowers local entrepreneurs, attracts investment, and bridges the between informal entrepreneurship and scalable formal ventures. We speak to Progress Mahureva, startup ecosystem builder, right here on the Mint. The Mint of Bradback. Don't go anywhere. Of course, the Mint broadcast to you from Zimbabwe, capital Harare. I'm Ibn. African companies to unlock the potential of the startup sectors, there is a need for deliberate support, improved access to funding, and regional collaboration. Startups thrive in environments where innovation is matched by infrastructure, where ideas can scale across borders, and where governments actively support entrepreneurship through enabling legislation and incentives. Building such ecosystems require cooperation between the public and private sectors, investment in digital skills, and integration into continental initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area to allow startups to grow beyond markets. Now, of course, we are joined right here on the Mint for conversation on this and other subjects, that being Progress Mahureva, a startup ecosystem builder, as well as Dawa Health co-founder. Progress, hello and welcome to the Mint.
Thank you so much, Ibn. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm very happy to be here to be discussing issues that are happening within the ecosystem.
Fantastic. To get the ball rolling, what makes a strong startup ecosystem from your perspective?
Many facets that make a strong ecosystem for startup. One of those is collaboration. Two, access to funding. Three, the legislature. We talk taxes, we talk of how easy it is for startups to get into the market, but also to continue sustaining within that market. But then obviously we have collaborations, where we see many startups collaborating, where we see established businesses coming to work with these same startups. So these are some of the facets that are very significant in a very vibrant startup ecosystem.
Right. And how does Zimbabwe compare to its regional counterparts in that regard?
I think it's like a baby. A baby has to grow. Obviously, one of the things that I've noted is Zimbabwe is still lagging behind. We have startups, but the recognition of startups is not there. It's not saying it's not there. It's not very existing on a large scale. Two, I think we have a lot of work to do around funding, because every room that you get into where startups are, or issues around startups are being spoken, funding is the elephant in the room always. So it means we have startups who are really thinking ideas, but there's no funding for that. But also another issue is we have startups that are having these ideas that they are developing, but there's no clarity in how they can put these startups into the national development strategy. To say, because the national development strategy says that we need to develop startups around telecoms, around food security. So we might be thinking of startups because we are seeing what's happening in the Silicon Valley, but how does it apply to us? How does it apply to your grandmother in the rural areas? So we need that disconnect to be removed so that we can have a stronger, vibrant startup ecosystem.
Right. What should Zimbabwe focus on as it it drafts its own startup policy?
Taxes. That's the first thing. The reason why some startups are not even wanting to be on the spotlight is because of taxes. Because from my perspective, it's really unfair for us to put Delta in the same bracket with a startup that is just starting when it comes to taxation. We need that to be clarified. And we also need those who are making policies to understand what a startup is. Because
what is a startup?
There might be a disconnect.
What's the difference between a startup and an SME?
So a startup, it's high growth technology based institution. So most startups are around technologies. Obviously, we can have.
Can you give examples of organizations that started off as startups that have now developed into?
So we have Airbnb, right? We have
Yeah.
Airbnb. We have your Facebook. We have your Uber.
Mm-hmm.
All these started a startup, and the most amazing thing about startups is they are information based. Most of them they make decisions based on data. They're data driven. So it's really different from what an SME is. In SME, I can just go and put a vending machine, start selling not a vending machine, just a table, and start selling by the corner. I'm already an SME. So we really need that to be understood, because if you go up the ladder, you have legislators thinking an SME is a startup. A startup is an SME. Yet we might not be clarifying that to them what is a startup. So we need that also to be clarified. Just us crying to say we are not being recognized, but because it's both sides matter here. Everyone has a role to play.
But what lessons can be learned from the big four countries that have been reflecting huge figures from a funding perspective across the continent? You look at your Nigeria, you look at your Rwanda, and so forth and so on.
I think I had a conversation with some of my Nigerian friends, and you start to realize that market is one of the most significant aspects to determine the value of a startup. How many people are you going to serve? How many people are going to be served by your idea or by your initiative? And here, look at Zimbabwe. We are roughly 18 million, right? Look at Nigeria. It's over 200 million. So when they look at the vibrance within a market, they know it's easier for a startup in Nigeria to save 20 people in a certain time frame, as opposed to in Zimbabwe to save such kind of people.
So what are the chances of success for a startup that could be launched from Zimbabwe?
I think we need to look far beyond our borders. I remember I was consulting some guys in Namibia, and I was telling them, your country is just 2 million people, and there's no way you're going to become a billionaire or to have a unicorn in this country unless you save people out of the borders. So we need to create institutions that are not only going to serve us as Zimbabweans, but that are ready to serve the whole of Africa. That we need to create models and processes that we can easily replicate in any other country. We need to build that. And most startups, they don't have such exposure to say, okay, am I building this for me, or I'm just building it for my country, or building it, for the whole of the continent? So we need such perspectives. I think that would be very good. And I think it ties in with the African free trade
right, of course, the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah.
And of course, that's something that's very much in the pipeline. How important is that for the development of the African startup ecosystem, as it were?
So it opens up markets. I think opening up markets to different countries will allow a lot of vibrance within the systems, but also I hope that opening up of the African free trade zones will allow for startups to collaborate with other startups in other countries, one, but also I hope it doesn't get to be abused by established institutions, because you can open up markets and it can be abused. So I hope we have parameters on that same African free trade not to be abused by established institutions.
Right. The next question that I would ask is, yes, you spoke about how it is that they've got access to markets.
Yes.
And speaking, of course, to the big four, or those that seem to have made better progress above the other. Of course, you've got the four on one paradigm, and then you've got the rest of Africa on another paradigm. So now, apart from the numbers game, what else makes the ecosystems thrive that Zimbabwe is not doing? Rwanda is not such of a big country, as it were, when you look at the numbers.
Yes.
And yet, it's one of the biggest recipients when it comes to, of course, investment where its startup ecosystem is concerned. What is it that Rwanda it's doing, besides the fact that, of course, it takes you 6 hours to open a business in Rwanda online?
But obviously, that aspect also is very pivotal, because no one is willing to stand for like months to open a business. That's why you find that some people, they just rather buy a shelf company than registering a new company. So we need to make sure that the process of registering a company should be very smooth and very fast, because it's just registration of a company. It shouldn't be that hard, because already we have these names in our portal, right? So that's one. Two, I think the flow of funds, it should be easy to move money. It should be easy to move money. If a startup is to open another branch in Malawi, it should be easy to move money to Malawi to start operations there. We need that. Another issue that these countries are doing very well, that I think we are not doing, is we need more of private and public cohesion. We need a lot of startups being into the current existing systems, so that they understand the negatives that is within the current systems, and they get to correct that.
Are there any practical examples, say, be it in South Africa or Nigeria, that perhaps you could use as reference of developed ecosystems that have produced meaningful results?
I think we have we can talk of M-Pesa. It's one of the largest or most successful stories that we've ever had in the African context, right? Where someone within an institution creates a system, and that system is adopted by the whole institution. Say, okay, we can work with that. Here, coming to Zimbabwe, I think we have a lot of established institutions that we might need their input within, especially within the investment space. You know, talk of your Econet, talk of your InScore, talk of your Delta. They made money, and they're still making money. They're blue chip.
Let me jump in there. What is the challenge where the funding is concerned? Is it the absence of the capital, or some missing elements within the ecosystem?
I think there are some missing elements within the ecosystem, because funding is there, money is there. Either we are playing in the wrong rooms, or we are playing in the right rooms, asking the wrong questions. Because look at the financial results of these institutions, humongous, right? Either they are not believing in the startups, or the startups are not building practical ideas that can feed within to partner with these institutions. I think there's a disconnect there, and that disconnect needs to be addressed if we really want the progression of the startup ecosystem in Zimbabwe. Because right now, if we talk of successful startups in Zimbabwe, or even if we are going to look at startups that are successful within Zimbabwe, we are only looking at Harare only, but we have so many cities out there, right? There's a disconnect. Right now, if you want to partner with a startup in Zimbabwe, you scramble from one conversation to another conversation. Why can't we have one portal or even a spreadsheet where we know that in this city there's these people who are working on these ideas. That way it allows us to be well connected, but also it allows us to collaborate. It allows us to grow the ecosystem, because it doesn't benefit us if you can be 100% shareholder in a company that's worth 1,000, when you can be a 1% shareholder in a company that's worth 100 billion. So we need to have a perception or a mentality to say we don't need to own everything. We need to partner and grow everything.
Well, now time for us to take a breather. When we come back, we continue with the conversation on how to unlock startup funding in the Zimbabwean and the African context. The men to be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Didn't graduate. I guess I blew it.
You couldn't advise him anything. He would just look at you and say, so who do you think you are?
We were just like really spoiled.
And then they just give me the receipt and I'd pay.
The guy walks in one day and then he says that he wants to make a movie.
He was blowing the money.
There was just like this habit that he had where as soon as he got money, it was gone.
I just didn't have the skills or the experience.
This money, I could see it disappear so fast.
Welcome back to the Mentor, broadcasting to you live from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. I'm Eben Mabunda. We are taking a look at the Zimbabwean as well as the African startup ecosystem. How can value be unlocked? When you look at the Silicon Valley, it was, of course, the bedrock of many global startups that we witness today. The big question is, how can Zimbabwe, how can Africa position itself as a movement or as bedrock that allows the growth of African relevant startups as well as the growth of African and global reaching startups, of course, coming from this very continent. And for that, I am in conversation with Progress Mahureva, a startup ecosystem builder, as well as Dawa Health co-founder. Dawa Health, of course, being a startup that has got its operations here on the continent. Now, picking up from where we left off, from personal experiences, I have engaged with startup founders who have their businesses that are domiciled elsewhere. I've met startup founders who are Zimbabwean, who operate from Zimbabwe, but they have their businesses registered in Mauritius and Singapore, in the United States of America. Why is that?
That's a very huge elephant in the room, because one of the major things why startup founders are doing that, I think, ease of access to cash, to funding. Because remember, it's not only about us building institutions, it's also about us being strategic, building those institutions on how we can get funding. Because if funding is not moving the way that you expect it, you go where the funding is moving in the way that you expect. So that's one of the things. But obviously you mentioned Mauritius, so I think tax purposes, because the taxation is very low, and the various aspects, how the startup is treated there. And when we say treated, it's is it easy to collaborate? Is it easy to partner with certain institutions? Is it easy to so these are some of the aspects that they might look very small, but they're very significant to building up a startup, because we are building towards sustainability, and you need any pipe that feeds into sustainability of that institution.
I've seen that work for these startups that I'm talking about, and they've been able to generate hundreds of thousands in startup funding, some of them even millions. I'm reliably informed. What is it that is in those jurisdictions that we can copy and paste into our own ecosystem, into the Zimbabwean economy, in order to ensure that we have funds flowing into Zimbabwean startups?
I think one of the things that I would love to applaud the government of Zimbabwe is they started a national venture company.
Capital fund.
Yeah, capital fund, which has invested in one of the institutions that I know, right? Which is a very good move. But I feel it's not enough to have the government investing in the country alone. I would love to see Zimbabweans also, whether Zimbabweans in the diaspora, Zimbabweans who are making money here, Zimbabweans who are making money out of Zimbabwe, investing money. Because remember, we talk of startups, we talk of investors, and we talk of market. These are the three most important, obviously in the government, these are the four most important aspects in the startup ecosystem. And when we talk of an investor, in most of them, they will tell you that, okay, cool, I like your idea. I would love to give you money. Where are you domiciled? If you tell them that you're domiciled in a certain country, they'll be like, can't you open an account in a different country so that we can send that money? You see? So it's also about the perceptions of those investors. I would love to see a conversation around the government, around startup leaders and investors that are out of the country, so that we can reach a point where we know that they are willing to move their money and their money is not being hindered. So that I think that way we can open doors to movement or flow of cash within the startup ecosystem. Because obviously we've had investment in mining, investment in real estate, which is good, but we need to also prioritize startups and know that the future is data driven, and we need to make sure that everyone who is building on data, we need it to be analyzed and to help even the government to make credible decisions.
Right. You mentioned the diaspora. Annually, Zimbabwe records about $2 billion in diaspora remittances.
Sure.
That speaks to the capacity of the diaspora to be involved also even in the startup ecosystem of Zimbabwe, as it were. But suppose there is a diasporan who's watching this conversation.
Sure.
Because much as, of course, we are on DSTV, this conversation is also live on Facebook as well as on YouTube.
Sure.
Right. So if there is a diaspora potential investor who's watching this very conversation, what would be their starting point in terms of getting to engage with a startup founder who's out there somewhere? Is there a pool where these startups can be found so that potential investors can say, oh, okay, this is where I'm going to put my money?
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good question. So the problem in our ecosystem is not even investors. It's not also lack of ideas. It's the bridging of the gap between those two facets. And what we have tried to do is we have incubation hubs. You talk of your Bank APC, your Old Mutual, your ZB, yeah. Those
Stanbic also has one,
yeah.
And you've also got several others that are within a good number of these tertiary institutions. Use it Innovation Hub, Midlands State University Innovation Hub, and so forth and so on.
But now the problem is we are having them domiciled in Harare only. We are having them domiciled in Bulawayo only, yet we have so many cities. So I would love to see a situation.
But with those that are in Harare, in Bulawayo, what are we doing with those for starters?
So I feel like there's a disconnect in working together within those hubs, right? And I think there's something that I said, where I said we need to have a spreadsheet with all the startups. A database that can easily be shared to an investor, to a diaspora that we're talking about, so that way a person can easily say, okay, I like Dawa Health, what does it do? And they can find information about Dawa Health there. They don't need to go on a Facebook. They don't need to go on LinkedIn. Then after that, they now make a decision to say, okay, let me look at their profiles and see what they're doing. And now I'm delving deep as an investor. And now you're getting contacts. You see, right now, if you want to invest in, for example, farming, right? You don't even know which startup is working on farming unless you get into, or unless you're in the circle of that startup.
Right. What is Dawa Health? You are a co-founder of Dawa Health. What is Dawa Health? I understand it's a startup. What is Dawa Health?
So Dawa Health, it's a Dawa, it's Swahili for health or clinic. So Dawa Health, it's institution that is bridging the gap between pregnant women and service delivery that pregnant women need. So we do home-based care for pregnant women. We've helped over 15,000 pregnant women to date.
Where?
In Zambia, and in Zimbabwe we've partnered with Zimbo Zabantu, and we are helping pregnant women in Epworth, in Caledonia, in Heathcliff. So we have understood that for us to be successful in the market, we also need to partner. And it's okay for startups to have that perspective, to say, okay, I have this startup that is already doing this, but I can feed into what they're doing. How can I work?
How does one access the services of Dawa Health? And what exactly, when you say you assist women, pregnant women, what exactly do you offer?
So we have clinicians whom we empower with a kit. This kit is your blood pressure monitoring system. It is your vitals, where you check your hemoglobin, where you check. You also need to check how many months that pregnancy is. Then you're given information. If you're a pregnant woman, you're being given information on your pregnancy, and you're being helped, because there are so many conditions that are underlining that. Pregnant women feel like I'm okay, but they won't be okay, and they might, especially hypertension. It leads to the death of a baby and the mother. So those are some of the things that we're trying to reduce. We're trying to reduce maternal mortality so that we can have a flourishing Africa.
So is that an app which they download? Is it something that they pay for? How exactly does it work?
So we have taken down that. We are now developing the second version of the application, but our services are working within the communities. So all they need to do, they can look for us on Facebook, then they send us a message on Facebook. They can even go on our LinkedIn, they can send messages, then we will be ready to assist them.
Right. From your practical experience as a co-founder of a startup, what is it that you've been able to do in order for you to unlock value?
One of the things that I feel startups are not doing to unlock value is they are not having conversations with the people that they are willing to serve. So people are building, these amazing ideas within their bedrooms, but they are not going to the people that they're willing to serve and ask, does this work for you? What do you want removed? What do you want to be added? So we need to do that as startups. The second thing is we are not showing up where real conversations around money are happening. And when those conversations are happening, we don't know where they're happening. You only hear after a conversation happened that, oh, there was a startup that was being funded. Oh, there's this that was. We hope we can have a portal or a database where we know that there's this and this event happening that's around startups, that is around funding that's happening, so that people can show up and they can understand and contribute, and even ask questions relevant to their institutions. Because some of these institutions, it's not that they're not building smart ideas. They have the smartest ideas, but they don't have the exposure to the rooms where these ideas can be heard.
Progress Mahureva, startup ecosystem builder and Dawa Health co-founder. Progress, thank you for appearing on The Mint.
Thank you so much. It was a very insightful conversation, and I really loved it. I hope it can help others.
Fantastic. And of course, that's a wrap on The Mint. Do follow us on our social media handles as In Papers TV Network, as well as at ZTM Prime. Your views and your thoughts are important to us. Remember to catch us every weekday, 2 p.m. Central African time, for the juiciest business stories in Zimbabwe and the continent, as well as beyond. I'm Ibn Mabunda, the money man. Let them do what they do. When we do what we do, we mean business. Thank you for watching and have a good day.